Great morning, world. Welcome to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast with your host, Dragon.
Great morning, everybody. And I like to ask my guests when they first come on. Pretty cool intro, right? I don't know if you catch the dragon had a mustache one time in that video, but it's a good time. But I want to say great morning, everyone. This is your boy Dragon coming at you with another Rise Up with Dragon. And I've got a very, very special guest, another person that I've synchronistically met. And, just like a previous guest I had, Katie Richardson. She was sitting here and I didn't know who she was. And then this guy sat here. And that's the Real Jason Duncan, and I want to welcome him to the Rise Up the Dragon podcast.
Great to be here, man. Great to be here.
Yeah, so cool. And one of the things that we love before we get into this is we just love just becoming more aware, self-aware, but also just conscious to the way the universe works and stuff like that. And it was one thing that I met Jason, and then found out that he was speaking the day that I had to leave, and all these things. Like, oh damn! But Jason and I just kept. I mean, he's a fascinating guy. He's got an amazing story. Super successful guy, and he's got a really cool concept that is the theme of this, called Exit Without Exiting. That when I first heard it, I'm like, what does that mean? And then he told me, and I just loved it. So we're going to get into that. But Jason and I kept on bumping into each other as well, like whether it was in the lobby of the hotel, and we just, it was just interesting because like one of those things that I'm pretty sure we were supposed to meet. So I'm psyched that we finally got him out of his busy schedule onto the podcast, and we'll just jump into it. So I've done a little bit of digging. It's a fascinating story of when you meet somebody in their polished state. When I met you, I met you in your polished state. You're speaking at this event and you've got all these achievements, but where you came from is fascinating. And I want to put the pieces together, from the moment that you went from becoming a youth, pastor to a lead pastor, and then, the adversities of becoming a teacher. And I was reading your story and I was learning about it. I'm like, it sounded like he almost became a lifetime teacher because he fell in love with it. But then the universe changes that and it just keeps leading him. So just take us back and share a little bit of that story, because it's so fascinating. Because I would assume that you were introduced to becoming a youth pastor and then a pastor by your upbringing, correct?
Yeah. So I spent my entire teenage years and even preteen years going to church camp as a kid. I was raised in a family that followed Jesus, and it was part of who I was, and I didn't really know any different. But I really enjoyed going to church camp every summer, and I start as soon as I was old enough. I started going back, and I was back as a counselor. So I would essentially spend six weeks at camp. 5 of those weeks I was a counselor, and the 1 week I was the camper. So my goal.
Let me ask you a quick question about that.
Yeah.
Going to church camp, and obviously you had a great time there, and then you became a counselor. Is it pretty common that kids that go to church camp become youth pastors?
I don't know. I'm not sure how that works out, but that was part of my story, because I wanted to go to school to design cars for a living. I was an artist. I wanted to be an industrial designer for GM or Porsche or something. Like
you mean as a kid you wanted to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been drawing cars since I was as little as I can remember. My dad had a 1970-ish, I forgot what it was, orange Super Beetle when I was a kid, and I remember drawing it, looking at it in the driveway, drawing it. So I was always interested in cars. I'm still a car guy and a motorcycle guy now. And I wanted to go to school. I wanted to go to art school and be a car designer. And I got accepted to 2 art colleges. But there was this one experience at church camp I had. I was, as a counselor, I'm hanging out. All the campers have gone to bed and all the counselors are out hanging out on the deck or on the field, wherever we were. I don't remember exactly where we were, but I remember laying there on my back, looking up at the stars, thinking, this is the experience that I want to live. Because it was not necessarily being at church camp, but the impact that I was having on people's lives. I really wanted to have that experience. And so I had what a lot of people call a calling, or whatever you want to call it. But I changed course. I went back home after camp, and I applied for a local private university. It was a Christian university here locally, and I applied for their youth ministry program, and that changed everything. I didn't go to art college. I started in ministry, and that was how I originally got into ministry, and how everything changed for me.
Let's talk about that just briefly. This concept of being like so excited about something, and then having a calling that obviously becomes more powerful than it and calls you elsewhere. When you had that calling in that instance, was it just the first time that you felt something like that happen, to the point where you just gave up on this idea of the cars?
Yeah,
because I'm sure some of your clients are in that position right now too.
Yeah, I think for me that was the first time, and I was all in. I wanted. I was very clear to me that that's what I wanted to do, and of course I had the influence of lots of really cool youth pastors who were the senior counselors and the leaders of the church camp growing up, and I admired those guys and what they were able to do, and so I decided that's what I wanted to do, and so I went to college, got a degree in biblical studies and ministry, and I spent 13 years doing ministry work. Now, I also, which is important to note, I was also doing sales during most of that time on the side. So I was selling life and health insurance to small business owners as a way to supplement my meager ministry income. So that's how I learned how to sell.
I saw that, and I was, I guess this is like a whole other topic about, pastors, and that the meager. What I found interesting about you is that while you were in that mode of serving at that high level, and you, as you said, you were all in, you still had this entrepreneurial spirit to go do something else, which is not common, that must have been an interesting time as that entrepreneur was kind of like poking its head out every now and then while you were just selflessly serving.
Yeah, I don't think I really had the entrepreneur spirit until the 2010, and I'll talk about that's kind of part of my story. But all those first years of just selling, I was just doing it because I knew how to sell. I was fairly good at it, and I was selling a decent product. And I just needed to make money. So to me, it wasn't entrepreneurial as much as it was, I just needed to survive. I needed to have money to be able to pay the bills, provide the lifestyle for me and my wife, and then eventually had a couple of kids. So to me, it wasn't entrepreneurial. I will say this though, in 1996, when my wife and I got married in 95. So in 1996, I started a company called Networld Consulting, designing websites. Now, that's absolutely crazy. I was not an entrepreneur. I was looking at this as another way hey, I can make money. Had I stuck with it, man, my life might have been a lot different. But I ran that for about less than a year, and it was just so difficult explaining to people what the web was. I mean, back then, nobody knew what the heck the internet was. Nobody knew what the World Wide Web was. And I was having to explain that. Plus, and this is why you need a website. And, I sold a few websites and I learned how to do HTML code and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't stick with it. So that was actually my first ever company. And then, it was for another 15 years before I started another company.
Well, I'm going to call this unconscious entrepreneurship because, it just as an onlooker, it's not normal, to see somebody. I can understand you needed to supplement and bring home the bacon, but it's pretty interesting that you also had the insight. You had skill sets that to sell, but you also had the insight to dip your toe into something that was about to blow up.
Yeah,
that's pretty interesting. So how do we go from there to becoming a teacher? Because it seems like you really love that.
Well, so it's a long and convoluted story that I'm sure your listeners and viewers are not really interested in all the gory details, but suffice it to say that in 2005, 2006, I started getting very disgruntled with what I experienced in the ministry world. I didn't like what I was seeing happen, and there wasn't anything unethical or bad. It was just it didn't match what I was reading about what we were supposed to be as followers of Jesus and how we were supposed to be impacting the world. It was more of this managing of a machine. And for me, I got to the point where I didn't feel like that was where I could be of highest and best use for the kingdom of God. So I decided to withdraw from ministry and go back to school, get a master's in education, and enter the classroom. And again, there's this whole idea of a calling, what I felt like was the right thing, but there's lots of details around that again, I don't want to get into the details, but I decided to do that. And through that decision, that's when I transitioned out of pastoral vocational ministry into being a school teacher. Now, what's interesting about that too is that at that point, going into teaching, even though I wasn't making a ton of money as a minister, I was making enough that my wife could stay home with the kids, which was such a blessing because our kids got to stay at home mom up until my daughter, who's the younger, entered kindergarten. So the year she entered kindergarten, I started teaching school. And so she had to go get a full-time job because teaching salary plus her salary was able to maintain what we were used to as a lifestyle. But that's why I entered the classroom out of pastoral ministry into education.
You know, what's fascinating, and this is one of the things that attracts me to people like you, because, you know, we're now in this reality where your success, you know, and we'll get into some of the amazing accomplishments that you've made. And you're out there helping other people become successful as well, but you also have a deep appreciation of money. You know, it's interesting. You know, when you meet somebody in their polished state, just like our friend Katie Richardson, when you learn their story, you know, you understand how special it must be for somebody like you to help somebody else rise up and appreciate that process. You know, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, Katie, now that you mentioned Katie, I had her on my show, The Root of All Success, which is my podcast. I had her on my show just yesterday. She recorded, and I was on her show a month or so ago. So it's interesting how our worlds are colliding.
Yeah, I love that. So when we were at this event, you know, because you went on and you started a business in the light fixture industry. Am I right?
It was not light fixtures. We were doing lighting retrofit projects in commercial buildings. And that's, you know, I left ministry to teach, and then I left teaching to get into entrepreneurship. But I consider myself an accidental entrepreneur. And there's a whole story behind why I left teaching, which I intended to do for the rest of my life. You mentioned that at the opening. I intended to be in education for the rest of my life. I absolutely loved it, but I didn't stay there. And now I'm an entrepreneur. I own multiple companies and training other people to exit without exiting.
So this is interesting because you developed this big passion once again, you know, and you know what's funny about this story is it's like, who knows what's next, right? Just because you're open to the calling. But I believe it was an economic, you know, downturn that ended the teaching. But then when you lose this thing that you were like totally passionate about, and even though it wasn't, you know, reaching the sky, your wife was home and you were feeling the blessings and you were going down that path, but that ends, and it takes a special kind of person to, you know, unpack that situation and, you know, tighten your belt and go on to the next thing. So how did you move from that? Like, how did you identify the next step and have it be something that was so big?
Well, I'll use the phrase accidental entrepreneurship, and I embrace that because I didn't ever intend to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't something that was in my vision. You know, I thought that this was going to be my life. I literally did think that I was going to be a teacher for the rest of my life. It was the most fulfilling thing I'd ever done. And after leaving teaching, I now know 100% that teaching is my superpower. It's why God put me on this earth. I think I'm gifted as a teacher to take complex concepts and break them down to where people can understand them in an entertaining and informative way. I just knew that I was enjoying teaching. I didn't realize that it was my superpower. I discovered that later through some of the coaches I hired to help me figure out what the heck I'm going to do next in life. But I left teaching. As you said, there was an economic downturn with the Great Recession. And even though I was the #1 teacher in my county, in my subject area, my students had the highest test scores of any students, which is phenomenal for a pretty large school district here in Middle Tennessee in the Nashville area. I loved it. I wanted to continue to be a teacher, but the way they made decisions when the economics were tough, finances were tough, was people without tenure, and the last people got hired were on the bottom of the totem pole, and they were the ones that got cut when cutting needed to happen. And that's what happened to me. So in April of 2011, I think it was April 2011, my principal came to me and said, "Hey man, sorry, but can't renew your contract for the following school year. I got to make some cuts." And so it was me and there was one other guy in the building. We were the last two people hired, and we didn't get to come back the following school year. And what sucks is that there were people in that building, teachers in that building, that had absolutely no business teaching kids. And you know this, I know this, there's people listening to this show that know this, that there are teachers who, for whatever reason, found themselves as teachers and they hate kids and they're no good at their job, but because their tenure, they get that. They get to stay in it. And that hurt probably more than anything. But so that was in April 2011. But let me back up. In the fall, the spring prior to that, in March, April 2010, I had a friend of mine came to me and said, and this goes back to the accidental entrepreneurship thing. His name is Bill, and he said, "Hey man, I got this idea for this hydrogen generator. We need to go in business and stuff." And I said, "Dude, first of all, I don't know one blankety blank thing about hydrogen." I taught eighth grade American history. I didn't know science. And I said, "Second of all, I love to teach. I don't want to own a business. I don't want to start a business." Well, for better or worse, he convinced me to go start this company, and I wasn't going to have to quit teaching. We would just do it on the side. So we started the company, which is still the company I own today, and we just rebranded it. But we started that company in March of 2010 at his insistence. And then in October of 2010, we formally filed our LLC paperwork. So we kind of started it, and then we formally filed in October. But again, with no intention of ever leaving teaching. And then, of course, in April, as I just shared in the story, the following spring, my principal drops the bomb on me, and I'm like, "Oh, what am I going to do now?" So that was the impetus. That's why I started the company that I still own today, that I have exited without exiting. But that's how it got started. But how it switched from what we originally did to what we ended up doing, there's a whole nother story behind that.
Well, I want to know, because I missed everybody said that you were so fantastic at that show. Here's where my mind is going right now. And I don't know if there is a correlation to where we're going to go with the exit without exiting, but there's a lot of experience that you've had where you've had to make decisions, whether they were on your own, via a calling, or pushed because of, circumstance, to exit things that you were focused on. And then you also saw, some of the, I don't know if I want to call it, injustice, but you saw a lack, you saw a need, you saw a need for good teachers and guidance and mentoring and stuff. I kind of feel like it's all being shaped. I would assume that this plays some role in the exit without exiting concept. I know there's a business strategy there as well, but it's just interesting. I'm always fine when I meet people like you. I just want to know why you are the way you are. So I just find it fascinating how the big guy in the sky has put you through this little obstacle course and pops you out on the other side as a success story, but very, very driven to help other people do certain things, maybe not go through what you went through in some sort of circumstances. Am I hitting that at all right?
Yeah, well, yes. And again, here's the kind of the back end of that story is that, when he said, "Hey, principal says, hey, I'm not going to be able to renew your contract," I'm forced with a decision to make. What am I going to do next? Am I going to go back into the corporate world? Am I going to try to find another teaching job? Am I going back in the ministry world? Well, I can tell you this, there's no way in hell I'm going back to the ministry world. I knew that for absolute certain. Wasn't doing that at all. Second thing, didn't really want to go back to the corporate world because I didn't really want to do it. I'd done the years in sales, so let's go back. Let's find a job teaching. That obviously makes sense, right? The business that I started never even crossed my mind. That day didn't cross my mind that was an alternative. So I started applying for the teaching jobs. But guess what, man? There were no teaching jobs to be had anywhere unless I wanted to move out of state. And I wasn't interested. Tennessee's home to me. I've been in Nashville practically my whole life. I grew up here. Ministry took me around a little bit, but this is home. So try to find another teaching job to stay here in town.
Was the other business not taking off at all? Is that why you didn't pick up on it?
Yeah. So the business that we had going with the hydrogen generator and ethanol stills and stuff was interesting, but not passionate about it. Didn't really care about it, and it wasn't making any money. I mean, we weren't losing money, but it was just this thing that we did, and we actually created a hydrogen generator in my backyard, in my shed, I ran my son's go-kart on hydrogen. I don't know, we can't create hydrogen, God makes hydrogen, but like we figured out how to capture it and manifest it without any outside electricity, and it was pretty cool. But that wasn't going to make any money, and I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. So when my principal, and this goes back to your question, so when my principal had that conversation, I immediately thought, okay, I'll go teach somewhere else. Couldn't find that. Now I'm faced with this decision. So what I started doing is I started hedging my bets. I started applying for corporate sales positions because I knew how to sell, and I could outsell just about anybody I knew. I knew I could do that, but I also took the business. At some point, the business became, ooh, there's an option here for me, but we can't do hydrogen. We can't do ethanol. We're going to have to do something different. And I thought, okay, I've got this company called Future Vision Energy, which is the name of the company. I said, what can I do in the energy space that's not about alternative energy creation, but what could I do that I could sell, like energy efficiency? And LED lighting came across the desk one day, and I thought, ooh, I can sell that. I can figure out what this does, and I could sell that. And that's what I committed to do. So in the next couple of months, so from May to August, I gave myself until August the 15th as a deadline, because August the 15th was my last paycheck that I was getting from the state. And I said, if I can do something, I told my wife, I said, if I can do something, bring some money in through this business idea of selling LED lighting projects to these big corporations and hospitals, et cetera. If I can do that, then I'll keep going with the business. If I can't, then that's it. That's my deadline. August 15th deadline. I'll walk away and I'll go get a job in the corporate sector. Well, on August the 12th, 3 days before the deadline, I take the elevator up to the conference room at a nice size regional hospital here in Middle Tennessee. I make the pitch of my life, and they bought it. And it turned out to be like a $2.3 million contract. Now, I didn't get $2.3 million that day or even the next 6 or 8 months, but that contract developed into that over time, which catapulted us into success and continued to build that business to a very sustainable and successful large company. I say large, to me it's large, but it's a small company in the overall scheme of things, but a very successful company. We ended up on Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing privately held companies in the country. Entrepreneur magazine is one of the top 360 best entrepreneurial companies in the country, multiple small business of the year awards, best in business awards, et cetera. Built an amazing team, but I was trapped by my business.
Dude, it's like sometimes I think we should call your story, but because it's like you keep getting to this what most people would call like a pinnacle, and there's just something about it that needs to shift or something like that. I love it. Keep going.
Well, so this goes directly to your question about that. My background led me to this concept of exit without exiting. And so what happened is that I was experiencing a lot of financial success, a lot of notoriety, a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment in my life in terms of, hey, I'm getting to drive cars and live in houses and go on vacations in places that as a pastor or teacher, I never would have been able to do. I'm able to provide for my community and through my church and all these things that I was not able to do before, but I was trapped in my business and it was requiring 50, 60, 70 hours a week. Sound familiar? Most entrepreneurs deal with the same thing. They're trapped by their success. They're trapped or lack of success. They are the middle of everything that goes on in their business. And I woke up to that when I hired a business coach. I hired a business coach in 2017. We'd been in business for 7 years, very successful. And I hired a business coach in 2017, and he didn't immediately pinpoint it. But as we started talking about the fact that, one of the questions he asked me was, if you could do anything, absolutely anything, would you do this business? I'm like, no, like, I don't even know. I know more about lighting than everybody I know, only because I had to learn it, but I'm not passionate about it. I don't like it. it's not a chore or a burden for me. And I built a very successful company. I have great employees that I provide for their families, but no, I would not do this. I would own a car lot. I would own a motorcycle dealership. I would do something different because I'm a car guy, motorcycle. I would do something completely different. And that began the journey of, oh yeah, how do I get out of the business? How do I exit it? And the reality was I built a business that required me at the center of everything so that my business wasn't worth anything. Even though we were doing millions of dollars a year in revenue and I was making good money, it really wasn't worth anything. So I couldn't exit it. I was absolutely 100% trapped by it. And that's when I started thinking, how do I get out of the daily operations without selling it? Is that possible? And that's what I figured out how to do. And now I've done something I refer to as exit without exiting. And that's what I teach literally dozens of entrepreneurs every single month on how to do that thing. And I'm changing their lives because they are getting out of the entrepreneur trap.
You know who you need to speak to, and I don't know if you do this, but health professionals. The whole business of being a doctor, because I was a successful chiropractor, completely personality driven, which doesn't have legs, and when you go to sell the practice, the value of your practice goes way down when you're leaving. So I'm excited to hear about exit without exiting, but that's a sector. There's a lot of personality driven, businesses out there. I would assume the reason why your employees were successful was because you would teach them what to say and all that stuff. But the idea of you leaving, so I'm curious to know how, because that company is still thriving, correct?
Yeah, still going great. In spite of COVID, we're still doing great.
So what's the secret? Tell us a little bit about this exit without exiting, because I love it.
Well, so without getting too in the weeds on the concept, but I would say that there were 4 very specific things that I was able to do. Some of it consciously, some of it unconsciously. But now looking back, I've extracted whether it was conscious or unconscious, and now that's the formula that I teach. But it starts with embracing delegation. Most entrepreneurs live and deal with the hero syndrome, that they're the hero, they wear the cape, they have the suit, and every time something happens, if somebody's in trouble or the business is in trouble, you swoop in as the entrepreneur and you save the day. Well, that makes you feel good, but it doesn't help your business at all, because even in spite of the fact that the Marvel movies and all these DC comics can come out and show that Superman can swoop in, or Batman or Spider-Man can swoop in, the reality is, even if they have superpowers, they can only be in one place at one time. Your business in the city is not totally safe if there's only one hero. What you've got to do is embrace delegation, the ability to empower other people to act on your behalf. Train them and empower them to do it without you confiscating that role back, as you actually delegate it to them, let them do it. And that's kind of step 1. And so what I started looking back in my, the 7 year up to that point when I hired the business coach and started thinking about this, was that, okay, over the last 7 years, have I empowered people to act on my behalf? And I had in some ways, but I hadn't totally embraced it. And boy, when I started learning about it in 2019 was when I really put the pedal to the metal on the exit idea. Was I am going to embrace delegation and train my people how to act on my behalf and the company's behalf, so that it doesn't require me. So that was number 1. That was the first step. The second step, and I'll explain this one, then I'll stop, because I don't want my response to be too long for you to interject. But the second step was eliminating stress. And this was one of the unconscious things that I didn't know that I did. Now looking back, I realized, that was really important for my ability to exit. Was that I've learned this thing called the law of open cycles. And it essentially states that stress in the human condition is not caused by the endurance of stressful situations. Rather, it is caused by too many open cycles at any one time. Now, if you've never heard of that before, it's a little bit foreign, but the reality is, every little thing you have to do, no matter how big it is, it's not the thing that causes stress. It's the amount of things all at once that cause stress. And so I had learned that, and I had been living it and teaching my employees, but I didn't realize that just that one little trick, and it's not even a trick, but it's a law, but that one law that I learned and started implementing, and how I taught my employees to do it, eliminated stress in my life, eliminated stress in their lives, and eliminated stress in my business life. And that was a huge key for me to be able to exit, because I taught them how to manage open cycles. How do you manage open? How do you close them quickly? How do you not let them open when they don't need to be open? So those are the first two steps: embrace delegation and eliminate stress.
Yeah, what's interesting about embracing delegation and then the open cycles is another form of delegation, but it's kind of like an internal one to identify it. Just curious, I love this concept of open cycles. So is the basic premise of that is, whenever you open a cycle, you should close that cycle before you open up another one, because it's the multiple cycles that causes the stress. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and we all experience this on our computers and our phones, and in a way that you could probably understand. So
it's funny you say that. As you're saying that, I'm looking at my computer screen. I've got a lot of open cycles going on right now.
So your phone or your computer, let's pretend that it's a Wednesday morning, and you go into the office and you turn on your computer or your phone and you open an application. And every single time you need another application, you open it without closing the other one. And that's a key to understand this as an analogy. If you never close any of the applications, they always stayed running in the background, and you continue to open applications, at some point, the RAM of your device will say, I'm done. And you get if you're a Mac person, you get the pinwheel of death. Or if you're a Windows person, you get just the frozen screen, and you got to hit the Control-Alt-Delete. You got to turn everything off. That's the same way our brains work. We can open a few applications at once. We call it multitasking, but we open those applications at once. We got all these things. And at some point, our brain is unable to deal with it. And that's why we feel something we call stress. Because no matter how big the issue is, if it's the only issue you have to deal with, you can handle it. You have the ability, but you add that issue to everything else, that's when you feel stressed.
That's huge, man. And that's one of those things that everybody is listening. They're going, he's right. And the execution of that would just dramatically change everything. So before we go to number 3, quick question, just rapid fire question. Somebody has 6 high leverage things they have to get done in a day. How would you recommend that person executes getting all 6 of those things done in a day?
Well, I think it's quite unlikely to be able to get all 6 of those done in any given day. So that's the bad news. But the good news is if you learn a little strategy called time blocking, you can figure out how to block time to handle specific tasks in a way that keep your cycles closed and managed correctly, so that you can get everything done that needs to get done.
We'll send you guys a bill for that information. So let's go to number 3.
Well, 3 is something that I think most entrepreneurs know, at least in theory, about, and that's establishing systems and processes. And there's no business on earth that's been able to have the owner, the founder, exit, no matter how he or she exits, whether it's physically or totally or just financially. They are not able to do it without systems and processes in place. You've got to systematize, you got to put processes in place. And so what I focus on when I teach people, and what I was able to do in my business, and what led me to be able to walk away, was I realized that I needed to do systems. I realized I needed processes, but I was still dealing with that hero syndrome. Like, okay, I'm the system, just run it through me, ask me questions. And I was feeling frustrated about that. And I thought, okay, I got to put systems and processes in place. But here's the thing. What's the most important system or process, or both, that has to be in place if I want to exit daily operations? Sales. Because without sales, you can't make money. Without money, you can't sustain the business. So I spent, of course, most of my years running my business as the number one salesperson, and a lot of times the only salesperson. And so what I did is I started consciously putting in place absolutely repeatable processes and systems in the sales process, so that no matter who was doing it, they were able to accomplish the whole process. And so I teach now we put together this thing. It was really kind of cool. It was an accidental way we discovered it, but we wanted to know, we were reading Good to Great book, right? Jim Collins, 2001, the economic engine. if for anybody who's read the book, you know what I'm talking about. Like, we wanted to figure out what's driving our economic engine as a business. And so we did this huge spreadsheet. We put it up on, we had a big 82-inch screen in our training center and put it on an Excel spreadsheet, the last 40 projects we worked on. And we started analyzing, well, what was it about those projects that we made money on, we liked, we completed in a timely fashion, et cetera. And what we discovered is there were 6 criteria that if we could get those 6 criteria isolated and picked out early in the process and eliminated deals that didn't meet these 6 criteria, we would stop wasting time on deals that ain't going to close and only spend time on deals that have a high probability of closure. And we ended up creating something I now refer to as a 20-point matrix. So you got 6 things, and you rank those, each 6 criteria, on a point scale of 1 to 5. So the perfect deal would be 30 points, right? So 5 times 6 is 30. But the reality is, it's got to score at least 20 for us to work on it. So if it's 20, we do it. No questions asked. We move forward. If it's 15 to 19 points, we got to talk to the sales manager or VP to say, hey, this is kind of a good opportunity. We're not really sure. But if it's below 15, man, lose early, walk away. Don't come in a distant second at the end after 6 months of pursuing it. But we created that system, that 20-point matrix, as part of our sales system. So now in my coaching program, when I teach people about implementing sales system, that's one of 3 pieces of a sales system that I teach you how to implement, because that allowed me to walk away. That allowed me to put somebody else in the place of, here's how you analyze a prospect. Here's how you analyze an opportunity. And this is how you stop wasting time on deals that ain't going to close.
Got so many gold nuggets there. It's interesting. Go-getters out there, the people that do the work, do the things, their focus is on doing high leverage activities to create opportunities. But very often those people get stuck in opportunities that are not a high enough rating, and then they guess out from that. So that alone is just super, super valuable. Curious, is this business doing better without you there now?
Well, it depends on how you define better.
More money.
I think that yes and no. And so here's the issue. So the issue is, in 2018, we got our best year we'd ever had. We'd never lost money. We've been in business for all those years, and we were just growing. And then 2019, I went through a partner termination. I had a business partner, and we ended up having a pretty non-amicable.
It's another form of growth.
Yes. Well, that tanked. That 19 was the first year we'd ever lost money. So to be completely fair, we lost money in 2019, to be transparent. But that was the year that I also realized, I'm the center of this business, and here's how I know. And this is how I know, because I was paying attention in 2019 to all the legal crap that was going on. Because I didn't have my head in the business, we lost money. And that was when I finally realized, holy crap, I am the center of this thing. I got to get out of the way. So rather than reinserting myself, when I realized that, I began to make haste in doing these 4 steps. The embrace delegation, the eliminating stress, the establishing systems and processes, and the 4th step, invest in people. And that's actually when I started investing in people really heavily in 2019. And then, of course, we all know what 2020 was. We came into 2020 with this reinvigorated, hey, here's our new thing. Jason, his long-term plan is to move out of daily operations. We're going to be the leaders of the company and run this company. 2020, woohoo, we're great. Boom, COVID hits. So the question you asked is, are we doing better without me? Yes, absolutely. But financially, we're not at the height we were in 2018, because we had 2 crap years back to back. But we're on an upward trajectory that wouldn't have been possible if I'd still had been the center of the business.
We could say we're fixing to. We're fixing to.
That's a good Southern term.
But just very, very, and I want to get more into investing in people as we come to the end. But the saying, God works in mysterious ways. It's funny because I actually don't believe in that. I think God works in very strategic ways, if you're open to that. So it's interesting to look at the hardships and the challenges and the come on, really, those things, and just recognize that they bring the best stuff out. And, 5 years from now, when you talk to, Jason Duncan and you say, how you doing now? I mean, who knows? He could be like an astronaut by then, I mean, who knows what's coming next? But it's pretty interesting, this organic process. So when we go into investing in people, because it seems like that's something that really resonates. And I believe you have a mastermind and you're doing a lot of that stuff now. Is that a big part of your coaching? Because I know that people hire you like you've hired others for coaching, but it seems like a lot of the service you're providing for these people is investing in them as well.
Yeah, I think the key, the key that ties everything together to successfully exit a business is you've got to invest in your people. You got to train them. You have to empower them, which goes back to the delegation thing. You have to train them and empower them. But there's also a financial investment that you have to make in your people. Like if you have been the center of everything as the CEO and you're going to step away as a growing, successful entrepreneurial business, the CEO is probably making a really good income. Well, what do you think about doing an investment into your business through your people to say, well, and I'm just going to use numbers I'm pulling out of the air. This is not necessarily reflect my reality, but let's say as the CEO of that company, you're bringing home $500,000 a year salary, which is not out of the pale of possibilities for somebody, building a pretty successful company. Okay. Well, what if you took 100 of that, only 20% of that, and you reinvested that back into your leadership and said, look, I'm going to give you more opportunities. I'm going to give you more responsibility and I'm giving you more money. Are you interested? Let me tell you, I haven't had anybody say no to that yet. And so they say, yeah, absolutely. Yes. So I made an investment. So on one hand, my salary, my take home pay goes down a little bit, but only temporarily, because now that I'm not daily in the business, I've exited the business without selling it, exit without exiting. Now, what have I got to do? Well, for me, I went out and invested in more businesses, started other companies, did more community projects. I spent more time traveling with my wife. Is my life, am I making more money now? And do I have more time than I had before? 100%. 100%. That's what an investment is you put out time and money with the expectation you'll have a profitable return. That when you put out $1, it brings back friends. That's the way I talk about investment. I'm going to put out $1. I want it to come back to me with friends. If I put out time, I want more time back later. So that's what the investing with people is. And now when I coach my clients on how to exit without exiting, that's what I tell them. It's like, hey, you got to do these 4 things. This is what I did and it worked. You can do the same thing. This is a formula that works for anybody and it will absolutely change your life.
So the concept, I just want to make gain clarity here. It's not about like setting your company up so that you can leave. It's also staying in some form of a profit from the company. Right. Absolutely. I mean, we're not talking about like, hey, I just want to take care of you guys so that you can run it. And you still, so what role, if I exit without exiting, am I still the CEO and I've just created a leadership that runs the company almost self-sufficiently, but I'm still the CEO collecting, hence, investing back in the company. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's dependent upon what you want. So you asked a question early on when you were saying, hey, what inspired you to do this exit thing? And I think here for me, I want to travel. I want to spend more time with my wife. I want to be able to start the businesses that help impact other people. Those are 3 things that I definitely want to do. None of which I could do as the CEO of that company. So if I step back as CEO, put somebody else in as CEO, which I did, I raise up leaders within the company to run it. And I am still legally responsible for the company. I still own the company. I'm still the president of the company. I still sign, I still have legal authority to sign on behalf of the company, still own it, but I still get paid. They send me a check every month. That is what I wanted. But other people, other people may say, you know what? I still want to come in the office 1 day a week. That's what I want to do. And the other 4, I want to play golf. Okay, that's what you want to do. Let's set your business up to provide you the results that you want, because this is what it's about. Success is getting the results you want. So what do you want? I'll figure out what you want. We'll design your exit plan to get exactly what you want.
This is, I was a doctor for 17 years and, I already told you what that was like as a successful doctor. And my exit there, I'm not even going to tell you about that. because I wish I had known you back then. I did not do the 4 things. But I became attracted to the direct sales industry for this reason only, because I wanted to create a business that was all about duplication, because Dragon's 50 years old right now. And when I wake up in the morning, I go all in with life, and I do, work at my business, but just like you, man, I want to travel. I want to be with my kids. I want to enjoy, life like I never could before. So I love this concept. So what's next? Because you got a lot of, and I also want people to know how to reach out to you. What is on the next? I mean, or actually, what is the goal here? What are we trying to accomplish? Is it because you're investing in companies, which means you're investing in people, because you're not investing in companies, you're investing probably in the people. But where are we going with all this? Is it just about helping a certain amount of people, or what's next?
My mission in life is to use my gifts of teaching and leadership to help other people get the results they want out of life. That's my mission. And I was able to discover that mission and write it down very clearly and know it and be able to recite it as I just did for you and your listeners in 2020, as I was trying to figure out what is next for me. And so now that my mission, what I want to accomplish is very, very clear, is to use my gifts of teaching and leadership to help people get the results they want out of life. Is what's next for me is to continue to build the personal brand around the Real Jason Duncan that helps people exit without exiting, which is why, I've got a membership that people can join and they get access to me. I do live teaching 4 times a month that you get access to. I've got online courses that I've put together on how to start businesses and grow them. I've got an Exit Accelerator. It's a group coaching cohort that I run over 90 days, and I only take 12 entrepreneurs at a time, and I show them the 4 steps and I teach them how to do it. I've got a mastermind called the Exiter Club. And the Exeter Club is this deep dive for select entrepreneurs who really want to do the things I just taught them how to do in the cohort. Now we're going to walk you through, and we do these great luxury retreats, and we get involved in each other's lives, and we help hold each other accountable, and we share opportunities and resources. So that's what's next for me. I'm going to continue to do that. And then on the side, I've got an e-commerce company. I've got a real estate investing company. I've got a private equity company, and I still own the lighting company. And so those are all the other things I'm involved in, but this is going to be for me for the rest of my life. I love business. I want to help people succeed at business. And I think entrepreneurs, and really, I truly believe this, entrepreneurs are the ones who change the world. It's not doctors, it's not lawyers, it's not teachers, it's not parents, it's not police officers, although they all contribute to the change. It's entrepreneurs. I mean, look, we're sitting here on StreamYard on our computers doing this show. All right, who's behind it? Entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are behind designing this stuff and making it great for us and able for us to do this. We literally, as entrepreneurs, can change the world. And I believe that, and I want to help as many people change the world as possible.
I love it. So just quickly, how do people find you? I mean, he's got an amazing podcast called The Root of All Success. His website is therealjasonduncan.com. Best channels to find you. I mean, do you have something that you're real excited about that you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah, well, the channels that I'm on socials are Instagram and LinkedIn at The Real Jason Duncan. So you can just go find me on either one of those. I'd love to engage with you there. The thing that I love to offer to people when I do podcasts like this is look up the Exit Accelerator. Look that up. Go to exitwithoutexiting.com. There's a video of me on there explaining what it's like and how much it costs to get involved. It's a 90-day live coaching program with me. That's the best way. Like, if you want to know how to get out of the daily weeds and the daily grind of your business and get out of a lot of you traded a 9 to 5 and ended up with a 24/7. You wanted to be your own boss. You ended up being your own employee. I will show you how to walk that path to get away from that and to do that thing that you really want to do in life, whether it's open another business or whatever it is. So go to exitwithoutexiting.com to join my upcoming cohort. I got one that starts very soon, and let's get a jump start on 2022. Let's figure out how to get you out of the weeds so you can go live that exit lifestyle to do what you really want to do.
So we'll put all of that stuff in the show notes for the podcast and YouTube. But just one last question that I just rapid fire just as we close out. What is Jason Duncan afraid of?
Oh, wow. Well, that's deep. What am I afraid of? I tell you, and this is the first thing that came to mind. I'm afraid of other people thinking bad things about me that aren't true. And I'm having to overcome that. I got a coach I work with that's trying to get that mental block of me thinking other people think bad things about me that aren't true. I just need to get over it.
You know, the reason why I asked that question is because I just want to remind everybody that, you know, you're looking at a super successful, you know, educator of successful people and still human being. And that's important for everybody to know. Love and appreciate you, man. This has been so much fun. You know, we just had so many different, you know, little touch points where we connected, and, you know, I just absolutely love, you know, what you shared here. And I think what you've done for people is you've given them a visual of something that they probably just been trained to think doesn't exist. You know, a lot of people are just locked up in their own mental prison that was built by somebody else. So thank you so much for that valuable information. Everybody go check out the Real Jason Duncan on all those channels, and love and appreciate you, man. And we'll have to do this again.
Thank you.